So the first goal, you will leave with an understanding why we've called this between a rock and a hard place. The reason is we are stuck in legislation between two opposing principles. Principle A, remember, councillors are charged to to have decision making in the public interest. We want to do what you want to do. That's why we exist. We exist to be your voice. We exist to plan the future together. And principle 2, principle B, is that we also have to run a sustainable council. What happens when you can't do both? Which one wins? So, just to check in, if anyone's thinking that there goes 10 minutes of my life, I'm never going to get back, why on earth have I come and what have these clowns been doing? I'm sure you're not alone. So, the journey so far is the ABC. I'm going to tell you the ABC of how we got here, and I'm going to tell you the CBA of how we get out. Amalgamation. There won't be anyone who tells me that amalgamation didn't have something to do with it, but I'll tell you why. We had financial issues prior to amalgamation. If I had $1 for every time someone told me it was their council that was the rich one and all the other 5 suckers have sucked them dry, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. Bigoton was moderate, Eidsvold was weak, Gander was weak, Monto was weak, Mundubbera was very weak, and Perry was moderate. That's what the financial situation was prior to amalgamation. So tell me, you put 6 weak, very weak or moderate councils together, what do you get? You don't get a strong one. Amalgamation, they told us, and all this paper is online for you to read at your pleasure. Amalgamation told us that what it would do, it would help us gain efficiencies as a council because we could choose a regional centre. How would that work? North to south, the centre is Eidsvold. East to west, the centre is Mundubbera. Population density, the centre is Gander. Any way you put it, it still means that people would have to travel from Brisbane to Mooloolaba to get a library book, to speak to someone, to pay their rates. That is what they asked of us. Brisbane to Mooloolaba, do you think anyone in Brisbane is going to do that? That's why it didn't work. B is for budget cuts by state and federal. Because people say amalgamation, but what happened the same year as amalgamation, the state took away, the feds first, the feds took away what was then baseline funding of the federal assistance grants. Each council, each of the 6, used to get around 200,000, equating to $2 million in the entire region. In 2008, they decided just to pay us 1, because we weren't 6 councils anymore, we were just 1. There goes $1 million in the first year. The same year, they took away what was called SCAP and WASP funding. That used to be a subsidy for our councils up to 75% to pay for our water infrastructure. Gone the same year. In 2013, Campbell Newman made a decision that RoadTech could not be in the South East Queensland area, so RoadTech had to travel further afield for their jobs. The jobs that we used to be awarded to our council staff, the road network jobs, then went to RoadTech, causing millions of dollars of loss to this council. In 2014, the federal government froze the federal assistance grant. So you know how I said we get $11 million, around $11 million? They froze it so it didn't go up by CPI. So that in itself cost this council hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in 2019, council was advised by Queensland Treasury Corporation and the state government that we were no longer able to borrow money. Now, we only had a debt of $2.4 million, not huge by council standards, and they told us we couldn't borrow anymore, and I'll tell you why in a minute. That's A, amalgamation, B, budget cuts, and then we had C,
cyclones and camels. Cyclones, I don't need to tell you all about our cyclones and our flooding and our disaster events. We had them in 11, 13, 15, 16, and we had 2 declared events just for the hell of it in 2017. We understand what it did to our community. We understand what it did to our assets. But I need to tell you what it does to our finances. So we got $166 million over all the years of flooding from state and federal governments to fix our infrastructure. That was our infrastructure damage bill. For this council, that was a huge burden and an influx of money that we had to bring in and take out. What it also does, whenever you get a new or renewed asset, you start your depreciation all over again. So we had a road network that we were depreciating and maybe only putting away 50% of that in our expenses column. As soon as that flood came, we now have to put 100% of that road back on. That blew out our depreciation in a huge way. What does that look like together? B and C. So this is a council that was amalgamated and was told that they could not withstand shocks. How are we going? Almost every single year there has been something. So I talk about cyclones and camels. The straw that broke the camel's back was in 2019, so a couple of things happened. 2019, we had our final flood payment, which meant that we were able to pay the staff who dealt with flood, had been dealing with flood for about 8 years, but there was no more money to pay any more work. It was something that we had relied upon. We also got told that we couldn't borrow for these 6 reasons. That we had increasing operational deficits. We did. We were always spending more than we could earn. That we had a heavy reliance on grants. Yep, we do, because we've got so many assets and so few ratepayers. And the state government told us we would always have a heavy reliance on grants. That we have a stagnant, ageing ratepayer base. Yep. So when I had this meeting with the state government, I said, great, thanks for recognising that. What are we doing about it? That we have a limited ability to generate additional revenue. Yep, we're not Brisbane City Council, no one is going to pay a parking meter. Most councils make money on their water, most councils make money on their waste. We do not have enough people to make money on either of those. They said that you've got, Rachel, your asset management frameworks are lacking. I said, I agree totally, and we're gonna fix that. That's something that we can work on. And then they told us that we were prone to natural disasters. I won't tell you what I really wanted to say to them, but I said, yes, thank you for pointing that out. Out of those 6 things, council can only do anything about 2. Reducing the operational deficit or spending less than we earn, and our asset management we can improve. This is the data they gave me that day. And they said, this is your cash projection. They said, if you keep spending, knowing that in this cash projection was all the flood money, and it was all the staff that we had on for floods, and it said that materials and services were going to keep going at this percent and wages were going to keep going at this percent. They gave me that and they said, you've got to change something. Your council has to change something. We did change things and that is much better now, so don't, it's on the front page of the paper. It is much better than that now, but we use that to point out at 2019, that's what we were given. So there's a question, how long have you been in deficit? I need to explain this graph. So deficit, red, surplus, green. The years of the surplus is, just so happens to be, 12-13, the year after the flood, So remember we flooded in 10-11? The way that it works is council spends the money and then is reimbursed by the state and federal government. And then you can see there is a 16-17 green there. And sorry, 10-11 was the flood as well, but it's just a little surplus because it wasn't as big as 13. So two things explain why we're not always in deficit in here, because we actually are. One is just the allocation of the flood payment. It depends when they pay us year on year. And the other one is the allocation of the federal assistance grants. Sometimes the federal government wants to get rid of their money before June 30. And sometimes they give us half in June 30 and half in the next year. When they double up, in 1 year we get a surplus. But it's not real. It's 1 day different. So in all of this, I ask you all to keep in mind that we are the second largest employer in the North Burnett. Every decision we make will have an effect on jobs. Every job means someone leaves the school, someone stops buying bread, someone doesn't go to the chemist, all of those things. And don't think that your council doesn't understand that. We understand that very, very well. While we're at it, let's bust a myth. So, again, maybe I should just keep getting dollars for every time I hear something, in that you've got too many inside staff and not enough outside staff. So we've got 45% indoor, 55% outdoor, and as of last week, we have 198 staff. However, the indoor staff also are payroll to pay the outdoor staff, HR to train and employ outdoor staff, the environmental team, when we do roads, there's an environmental impact and cultural studies, purchase orders. We've got purchase orders for materials, the inside staff do that. So there are a lot of inside staff jobs that only exist to support the outside staff. Why have we got 8 managers? And if anyone is interested, you should go back and look at the annual reports pre-amalgamation, but also at amalgamation. We used to have more managers and or directors, as they were called then. But why? And there's a very simple explanation, but it only occurred to me when I took on this job, because I asked exactly the same question. Most businesses are unilateral. So most businesses, you've got one focus. If you're at an engineering company, your focus is engineering. You know the legislation inside and out with that business, but you only have a couple of pieces of legislation. You have you've got that unilateral skill set, and you go on about your business. In local government, with all the services that we deliver, we need technical skills and expertise in a range of different subjects that we can't find in one person. Because the person who does sport and rec or communities or all the rest is unlikely to also be a civil engineer or technician. As per legislation, you have to have some kind of technical ability that you sign off on jobs. So you have to be someone who has studied in that field or has skill sets in that field. Wherever possible, we combine the skill set of our managers, and at the moment we've got a very, very busy manager who has 3 portfolios. But that is extremely rare, to find someone who is that broad in the skill set. So we've gone through the ABC of how we got here. Here's the CBA of how we get out. And the first one is challenging the status quo and civic duty.